welcome back to Fred's Storybook Barn, Cozy Tales from the Farm. That evening, Fred snuggled into the hay as Farmer Jane pulled a new book from the crate. Tonight's story, she said, is called The Elves and the Shoemaker. There once lived a kind old shoemaker named Nicholas and his wife Martha. Times had grown hard, and one evening Nicholas cut out his very last piece of leather, just enough for a single pair of shoes, and went sadly to bed, worried about what tomorrow would bring. But the next morning, when Nicholas came down to his workbench, he found a perfect pair of shoes already finished, stitched more beautifully than any he had ever made. Amazed, he sold them that very day to a delighted customer, and with the money, he bought enough leather for 2 more pairs. That night, he cut the leather and left it on the bench, and the following morning, 2 more perfect pairs sat waiting. Day after day this kept happening, and soon Nicholas and Martha's little shop was filled with happy customers, and their small savings began to grow. One night, curious and wondering who could be helping them, Nicholas and Martha decided to stay awake and peek from behind the curtain. At the stroke of midnight, 2 tiny elves hopped up onto the workbench and set cheerfully to work, hammering and stitching by the moonlight, giggling softly as they went. Martha noticed that the little elves wore only simple, well-worn tunics, thin against the night air. Touched by their kindness, she decided to make them a gift. That evening, by candlelight, she sewed 2 tiny new outfits, complete with little caps and tiny curled-toe shoes, and Nicholas left them neatly on the workbench in place of the usual leather. When the elves arrived at midnight and found the little clothes, their eyes lit up with joy. They pulled on the new outfits, admired themselves happily, and danced merry little dances around the shop. Then, still giggling, they skipped out the window and into the moonlight, never to be seen again. But Nicholas and Martha never forgot their kindness. From that day on, business kept flourishing, and the shop grew into the finest and best-loved shoe shop in the whole town, all because 2 tiny helpers were once thanked with a little kindness of their own. Farmer Jane closed the book softly and looked down at Fred, who was already dozing off with a happy, sleepy quack. "Good night, Fred," she whispered, blowing out the lantern as the barn settled into the dark, ready for tomorrow's chapter. Thanks for listening to Fred's Storybook Barn. Like and subscribe for more cozy tales from the farm.